Supo Moogles, Schwans27 here to recap round 1 of our latest event of the Final Fantasy VI Worlds Collide randomizer community named the Blackjack Battle Royale, featuring a draft system and a last racer out format for each of our groups. In case you haven't seen the explanation that Aprebs did of the tournament and flag sets that each pod will be running, check out the link in the description. In these recap videos, we'll briefly go over how the flag set shapes strategy for our runners. Since there are 10 groups with 5 runners each, instead of doing a comparison of each of the runners within their group, I'll show off how the first place runners at each table took the options that they were given to craft how they approached the seed. First up is Alexander, where we knew that Setzer with slots was going to be a starting character, along with an Esper for free with some buffs to the stats of characters. However, enemies have tough scaling and shops are greedy with expensive items and cheap returns. This meant that we would probably be leaning more heavily on looting versus shopping and not getting too much free progression because of the Themasin Heirloom card for 3 characters and 1 Esper to start, meaning enemies were already at level 10 when the seed began. We started off with Gao, who had Sword Tech and Jump, along with Gogo and the Esper Torado, which had a nice Ice 3 spell and a Speed +1 stat boost on it. Heroable came in first for the table, but his footage has since aged off of Twitch. However, I was able to watch the run before it disappeared, so I do have some notes on what he did. That doesn't make for a good video though, so we'll use the footage from F. Coughlin, who was only 4 minutes and 5 seconds behind in second. However, this was an extremely tight group, with the first 4 spots being within 10 minutes and 30 seconds of one another. F. Coughlin decided on getting the Esper Stray at the Colin Jinin, in spite of not having any good spells on it. After getting dried meat to grab Morph Terra at the Veld, it was into the Serpent Trench, but he took a wipe after racking up too much free progression in the seed. He decided to change direction and go to the Leet River for levels where the mobs were much more friendly. Heroable was able to avoid this dilemma by finding Super Balls in the World of Balance South Figaro item shop, so he took out Gigantos and the Classroom Monster in a Box for levels and was way on his way to snowballing after that. After a pair of Ultros fights, F. Coughlin was able to get back on track, although he was still behind scaling, which made boss fights a little bit slow, although they weren't difficult with Welk and Zozo. After grabbing 2 more free Espers and heading to the Sealed Gate Cave for some fixed dice for Setzer to use and a reward of a Dragon Horn that synergized well with our jumping Gao. Heroable grabbed this item much earlier, so his offense was much more potent at the same point in the run. Eventually the Espers continued to be collected, putting F. Coughlin at 9 Espers before getting his 5th character, which had to be at either Serpent Trench, Mobliz, or Kefka at Norsh, with him choosing the easily peekable Mobliz that had Realm and then just swapping worlds for Edgar and Esper Mountain for Go mode. Being able to swap the fixed dice between Setzer with an Offering and Gao with Jump and Horn to go with Ragnarok swords for Edgar and Terra allowed him to breeze easily through Kefka's Tower in spite of being slightly underleveled and having to take on difficult bosses like Goddess at Inferno, Stooges at Guardian, Haydn at Poltergeist, and Vanilla Doom, and actually having the most difficulty with Ifrit Shiva at Goddess due to multiple Flare Star casts. After swapping Realm in for Terra at the final battle after learning some spells, access to X-Zone and Life 3 meant that only magic was annoying to deal with, but using Dispel on Edgar, who was inflicted with Stop, was a welcome counter, and F. Coughlin was able to finish at just after the 1 hour 30 minute mark. Onto the Carbuncle table, which drew the random bosses instead of shuffled card, and we already knew our only 2 starting characters had to be Magitech Terra and Runic Celeste, which could make early games slower with less offensive turns on bosses, but potent Espers, including the one at the Sealed Gate Cave, one at Zenthi for 25,000 GP, and one in South Figaro Basement having 3 to 5 spells with a guaranteed stat bonus, made them easy free progression grabs to start off, especially after finding a Ragnarok in a chest for Celeste, while Terra was using her Magitech ability. Instead of opting to grind for levels, Boo took out the Cranes at the Welk spot to reward an EXP egg, another great early game pickup, and turned to the Opera House Disruption to finish learning the good spells from the early haul. After defeating Kefka, no, not that one, the runaway kind, the seed gave us Throw, Control, Gao to add to an already stacked party. After washing up on Shura and Nikea after 2 Espers and Gao's checks, an Atma weapon was purchased that paired well with the experience egg reward, as if we didn't have good enough offense already in the seed. Unfortunately for him, it was defense that was needed at the Goddess fight at Zozo Tower because Gao kept getting killed since the boss got around Celeste's Runic with spells that don't play nice with that ability. After fighting finally getting through that fight, our next character had to be at one of 4 really awful checks: Leet River, Mobliz, which would need to have a solo character against that second boss, Kefka Narsh, which meant splitting the party and only having a 2-party boss fight, or Magitech 3. So Boo opted for the less of all evils with that last option, and it paid off with Health Shadow. After going to a dead check Gao Manor, he opted for Floating Continent, still looking for 2 more characters and running into Magi Master, resorting to Madoin Summons and Throw, followed by Doomgaze, but the relatively short duration of these battles showed off how high his party levels were at this point from the experience egg and doing several checks with fixed encounters. And the multiple spots for Gigantos in the seed also helped. Unfortunately, his 5th character is not in the Floating Continent multi-part check, so he opted to grab Umaro at Mobliz after defeating Umaro. How appropriate. Since Umaro's checks did not lead to a character, he then used the check knowledge to go to the Velt Cave for his Go Mode Mog. He sent Genji Glove Atmo Weapon Celeste up the middle path and was really lucky due to a French Vanilla Spicy Chicken at Guardian and 2nd Magi Master at the Poltergeist spot, which weren't a problem with the defense ignoring weaponry. Having access to instant death, mute, and golem meant that Kefka wasn't a problem, so Boo cruised to a 1:19:39 time, which only beat the 2nd place time by slightly more than a minute, and the difference between 2nd and 3rd at this table was 11 seconds as shown here. The Palador pod started with Sword Tech Sabin and Umaro guaranteed, with no toys of Rod Super Balls or Elemental Shields in shops, but equipables were balanced random 7 characters along with an objective Dragoon set for 2 dragon kills. The random 3rd character was Sabin's Figabro, Edgar with Morph, so this made the Dragon's Raiment objective a very appealing option with 2 dragons near our starting characters' checks, although it would depend upon the gear selection for the balanced random equipables. After peeking lock at the Yeti Cave spot prior to continuing to loot, Jump Shadow was on the Figaro throne, and we were very character heavy to start the seed. After grabbing an Esper at Gao Manor and then doing some grind fights and defeating the first dragon, Falcon Hit was ready to go for the character to knock Umaro out of the party, especially due to the proximity of his weapon shop check, and an Aura Lance for Shadow, a Curse Shield, although it was 11 this seed. He opted for Phoenix Cave to defeat his 2nd dragon, and Mog was the reward to give him the character requirements at 31.5 minutes, along with a Dragoon set to supplement his already potent offense. After doing 3 checks for 2 Espers and a Valiant Knife, he decided to head up to Floating Continent instead of going through the Edgar or Mog loop of checks, rewarding him with Terra and 2 Espers to bring him to an even 7-7, one of my favorite adult beverages, by the way. This meant that World of Balance Narsh was even more appealing, grabbing an Esper at Welk and offering to go with the Valiant Knife, letting Go-Go fall to the World of Ruin Narsh mines, and Go mode for Kefka Narsh. Levels were at 39 or 40 upon heading into Kefka's tower from a combination of 4 dead checks and 2 dragons, so in spite of fighting Funbaba at Guardian, Inferno 1 boss later, and Magi Master at Doom without Berserk, it still only took 12 minutes to get through the tower. Using Quick to pull off the Permamorph on Edgar on Tier 2, as well as having Doom, Siren, and Fenrir made for a 7-minute 45-second final Kefka climb, finishing 11 minutes ahead of the 2nd place runner. The Ragnarok group had arguably the most difficult hand of the casino, as it seems that the participants decided to make it as miserable as possible for one another. Commands are random with duplicates possible, 20% of fixed encounters would be a boss fight, the statue bosses are shuffled amongst themselves, an austere start of 0 GP, no tools, and most importantly, 0 Phoenix Downs leads into the other really difficult card of the seed, Finality, which enables permadeath. Yikes! This means that you cannot revive a character once they die in battle, because of not being able to buy Phoenix Downs and not starting with any either, so Life 3 and by extension the Phoenix Esper would be really important to find. Checks that are normally ideal for the start of a run that have forced battles are suddenly not as appealing if they're boss fights. Although you must defeat 3 of the toughest bosses in the game with Doom, Goddess, and Poltergeist, at least you know that they'll be in Kefka's tower, which can possibly help plan for your party composition in the tower, but you don't know which lane they'll be in, so that's really not all that helpful. The starting characters were Tool Setzer, Dance Mog, and Umaro, and Metis found Super Balls in the World of Ruin Collagen shop after grabbing an Esper from the check. With those Super Balls, he decided to head up World of Ruin Narsh to fight the dragon after getting some levels from taking off the Moogle Charm in the South Figaro basement. This propelled his levels forward, and the Pearl Lance from the dragon was usable by Mog with the Dragoon Boots. Unfortunately, the next boss wasn't as helpful with the Super Balls, but he was able to get through it thanks to a Pearl proc on Haydn. The Yeti Cave was an item, but with permadeath on, a dead check isn't necessarily necessarily a bad thing, as you want to be over leveled so you don't have to worry about characters dying without an ability to pick them back up, thus prompting a reset. The next character had to be in World of Balance Norsh after exhausting our other options with Shadow at Lone Wolf, then Terra at Floating Continent Arrival, so he opted to short circuit out of the 3-part check at that time to head to the Sealed Gate Cave for Cyan. After a shopping detour, Metis grabbed 2 more Espers before getting Celeste from Doma Siege and opting to get an extra progression for her Magitech Factory check to get his last Esper. After taking out Goddess in the middle path, Doom froze the only character left standing, which only delayed the inevitable Merton onslaught, and Poltergeist didn't behave with the Stop Blaster on his entire team. On the refight, a Hyperdrive and Sap damage left Mog at 3 HP in a dream, but he was able to persevere with a suboptimal party composition due to a Minerva and some healing items. Having Sniper offering a jumping Mog along with X-Zone, Ice 3 and Fenrir meant a 10-minute final battle in spite of a stop and sleep on Tier 2, then losing Shadow on Tier 3 and Terra to a Hyperdrive on Final Kefka, thanks to a lot of procs with the Sniper, finishing a whopping 25 minutes ahead of the next runner in the group. Starlet's hand consisted of 2 vanilla options, with gear and shops being original, along with Gao's Rage command, but we were also given a Jump Edgar along with the Ultros League vibe of an extra 3 characters or Espers for Kefka's Tower skip. Vanilla shops mean that most of the really high-end gear would come from looting chests versus random searching in towns, so that would be a runner's focus. Gao's other ability was Lure for the Seed, and just like in Palador, the other Figabro, Sabin, showed up to start with Magitech and Natural Magic. Gao and Sabin have horrible vanilla equipment pools, so these characters wouldn't be ideal for this set of options, but thankfully Runic Celeste was on the Figaro throne. Drulith uses vast game knowledge to only stop at certain shops around the looting phase, picking up enhancers from World of Ruin South Figaro for half off, grabbing earrings, white dress, and warp stones from World of Balance Albrook, dried meat and Magus hats from World of Balance Mobilis, and finally some elemental rods from World of Balance Thamasa, so it really doesn't matter, as The Rock says, what the equipment pool is when you're throwing rods. This pointed shopping for magic enhancing gear and rods allowed him to cruise through the potentially difficult level 10 Gigantos fight in the Serpent Trench at level 3 that also granted him a ton of XP. He then rattled off 7 Espers in a row, only taking 25 minutes to acquire that much progression. However, his magic heavy party composition took a while to take out the goblin mobs in the Opera House disruption. Thankfully, the boss was dispatched with a single ice rod for his 5th character, GP Rain Mog. Another Esper and a Dragonhorn in Magitech Factory meant that Edgar was finally able to use his full command potential, and some physical offense was used in the party. At the end of the 3-part check, Goddess awaited, nearly wiping his party with only 1 soul survivor at the end of the fight. That didn't allow him to use the Thunder or Pearl rods that he had purchased, but it netted him the 9th Esper that he was after. After some indecision about where to go, including almost going all the way through Mount Colts, resetting at Poltergeist, he decided to peak Phantom Train for his 6th and final character, Gogo, for Kefka requirements. However, he decided that his levels in the low 30s were not good enough for the tower climb, opting to take on a pair of dragons prior. He sent Edgar with a meat shield up the middle path, who was in the air for most of the fights, and Sabin did not survive the Chatternook fight, so KT was still a bit of an issue for Drulith, even in spite of getting more levels. Shout missing on Tier 1 and no other access to instant death or mute, and having to use Life 3 for calmness protection meant a much slower final boss than in some of the other groups that we've seen thus far in the Blackjack Battle Royale, with Tier 2 in particular lasting 6 minutes on its own. But good usage of rods in the back end of the battle really sped things up, as he was able to still finish 9 minutes ahead of the runner-up time this week. The Odin pod drew a final Kefka that required 4 dragons in addition to the normal 6 characters, 9 Espers, but in lieu and progression-based scaling, the enemies would be a mirror match of party highest times 1 for level, HP, MP, XP, and GP, with a maximum level of 50. 2 skill unlocks with 8 sword techs for Dream Awaken, and 8 blitzes for Floating Continent Escape, of which that was something we could do, being that we started with Throw Shadow. The other 2 characters that this seed gave was Sword Tech Setzer and Blitz Lock, so we did have the right combination for one of the 2 skill unlock objectives, just needing Cyan, as well as 3 different free check options, as Ensign Wesley chose Gao Manor, where he found Lord Terra, which meant another free check with the Sealed Gate Cave as the Bismarck Esper. A cheap 4,000 GP to Zen Thief Economizer meant Terra with Grand Train was online early in the seed, with finding shurikens in a shop for Shadow and fixed ice in a chest for Setzer. After taking some grind fights in the South Figaro basement, he He grabbed 2 more Espers from Setzer and Locke's free checks to put him at 4 characters, 3 Espers, along with a 9 battle curse shield that was given to Locke, while enemies rode on the Grand Train all the way up to the floating continent, which was the obvious choice with the ability to unlock Bum Rush early in this seed. The 3-part check netted 3 Espers, as did the next 3 checks he did to give him Esper Go mode by 35 minutes into the seed, as his high-powered offense, even with bad spells on Espers, meant disposing of bosses easily even at the same scaling. Cyan was lying on the ground in the Velt Cave, and this allowed Ensign Wesley to go through Cyan's dream to grab all of the Soratech abilities for Setzer, in spite of gaining more Espers than needed. However, the mirror match scaling meant that the extra progression did not count against him as it would in a regular scaling situation. He also found Gao as the second reward spot, which gave him the character requirements regardless. He decided on taking both of the Kefka Tower dragons, using his entire party for the Skull Dragon spot and Setzer Shadow for the Gold Dragon spot. Levels in the high 40s meant that his enemies were difficult, but his Grand Train, Bum Rush, Quadra Slam, and Throw offense still easily took down the boss gauntlet, and then having Cleave with Mute and Phantom to counter Calmness, defeating Kefka 4 minutes ahead of the next place finisher in the Odin pod. The Sunflare Esper's table Bahamut was the first instance of a card override in the tournament, as Near Horizon, 5 characters 8 Espers for Kefka Unlock, was countered with a Far Horizon, 8 characters 12 Espers Unlock, to swing the length of the run greatly longer than normal. A pair of objectives for a plus 20 speed with the Coliseum win, along with an always auto-condemned one, really force you to learn how to weight trick with faster ATBs, and finally, starting with Blitz Sabin and his great checks, especially Imperial Camp to start. Our other characters were Dance Terra and another reincarnation of the brothers Figaro with Control Edgar. After picking up a couple of rods in the World of Balance Nar's shop, it was off to the Sealed Gate Cave for looting and a pair of Espers from the free checks. Going to Imperial Camp, Gar used Control on the first encounter Doom Dragon to easily get past it with a Fallen One followed by a regular attack, then using the Dance ability to snare the Behemoth, which allowed him to catapult up in levels at a quick pace, grabbing an EXP egg in a chest, but unfortunately it was after the check was done and Realm was obtained. After defeating 2 more bosses with rods, he went to the Coliseum for the plus 20 speed objective and an Atma weapon that pairs well with the egg and Katana Soul in the Classroom Monster in a Box for an offering. Without elemental protection early in the seed for Merton, he had to rely on Bio against most bosses with Terra and Realm, which caused the fights to be longer, although a few dead checks with Dragonhorn and Kefka at Narsh and an Economizer at Zozo Tower allowed his party to get more levels than the progression. After finding Cyan at Owzer's Mansion and Red Jackets and Jador for 3 of the 4 party Merton protection, it was a short trip to Mount Zozo for Jump Shadow, then Mog and Cyan's Dream, and Gao at the Velt Cave rounded out the character requirements, along with a Thunder Shield on the Doma Throne, which finally allowed the offense to really start up with Merton and a pair of Atma weapon users. A 3 Esper Floating Continent was a welcome sight, as Gar was now on the hunt for 2 more with peekable checks at Gal Manor, Doma Siege, Phantom Train, and Jerusalem and Moogle Defense. However, with the plethora of money he made from a cat hood, decided on Auction House for his Go Mode Esper after Doma Siege. Very high levels from extra requirements meant the Kefka Tower bosses weren't a problem, although a French vanilla goddess almost gave him a reset. Although he technically was 5 minutes ahead of the next place contestant, not suplexing the Ghost Train in the Kefka's Tower may have invalidated this run, but petting Interceptor after the Velt Cave check counterbalances this egregious mistake. The Howling Wolf, Fenrir's table, was saddled with a cruel combination of Far Horizon and tough scaling meant the bosses inside of Kefka's Tower were going to be at least at max level for this seed. Dragons were also mixed in with bosses, so a dragon spot may not necessarily be a good idea for leveling or learning spells, but it might not increase scaling in that case, and an objective for learning all Blitz commands for completing Elite River rounded out our options. We didn't know it yet, but our 3 starting characters ended up as Magitech Sabin, Health Cyan, and Soratech Mog, who at least could get to Soratech 7 naturally with the long seed. Mogray ended up finding an Atma weapon in the chest along with Thunder Rods to break through early bosses. He grabbed Throw Lock from Mount Zozo using Ice Beam and Dispatch and throwing the Blizzard Sword at Ifrit after some grinding in the desert, which then led him to the Ifrit Esper in the Narsh weapon shop and Gigantos in the Monster in a Box. A 3 Esper Cyan's Dream along with 1 in the Collapsing House gave Magre some offensive possibilities with some decent spells for his team, especially with Shadow and Imperial Camp to swap out for Cyan. He was still behind on scaling, so decided to take Floating Continent's fixed encounters and multiple bosses to catch back up, although he had to slog out a fight against Magimaster with only Throw and Dispatch, as well as 3 more Espers to collect. The World of Balance Narsh loop with Mog's checks and Kefka at Narsh also didn't reward a character, but there was an experience egg in the Moogle Mines to go with the Atma weapon for Sabin and an Esper teaching Merton for Shadow. After finally collecting enough shiny stones for Go Mode, he still needed 3 characters, so peekable checks were on the menu with Celeste at Doma Siege, but the South Figaro Prisoner and Phantom Train were not characters, so Magre chose Phoenix Cave, which is unfortunately his 13th Esper. A trip to the Opera House netted Terra, which turned into Realm for Go Mode at Mobilis. After easily taking out the bosses in the gauntlet, except for Doomgaze, which just took a while after passing the level check, somehow the Throw Ragnarok Locke was the weakest party member, so the final battle wasn't an issue, except for having to use Phantom as calmness protection, but he still finished 8 minutes and 20 seconds ahead of our second place contender. The Madeline table drew the Figabros to start with Tools Edgar and Blitz Sabin, along with the ability to earn all blitzes by completing the Elite River and Discounted Magic, where spells cost 25 to 75% of MP, but the biggest hurdle of this seed was the pathetic characters, where the stats were 20% to 60%, similar to the MP costs, but this would severely hurt the ability of characters to punch through fights. Locke with GP Rain that doesn't care about stats would join the crew for Pero Que Nariz, along with Stray Heir to the Figaro Throne, a Ragnarok for Edgar at the Narsh Weapon Shop, fixed dice for Sabin, and a 9-battle curse shield with some ribbons. With really bad stats, it places bigger emphasis on getting more levels, so the grind was on, with an opening at Imperial Camp. A few Espers later, a very weak Cyan with stats in the teens was somehow holding up the house in Tizen. Unfortunately, Pero Que Nariz was stuck with the Standby Samurai through getting 5 Espers and 2 dead checks while focusing on checks with Monster in a Box for an offering, but eventually stumbled upon an Atma weapon in the Figaro engine room for Cyan to use before finally getting Gao writing love letters at Mount Zozo and then Strago at Doma Siege for Go Mode, entering Kefka's tower at just over the 1 hour and 1 minute mark. Bringing his whole crew for Party 3 was a great idea after seeing Doom at the Inferno spot and killing the White Dragon for even more levels. Unfortunately, a Vanilla Guardian proved to be too much when getting to the Dataluma battle program, then 2 Delta hits from the 3 Stooges at the Goddess spot, so it wasn't until 1 hour and 22 minutes before getting past Guardian again from walking back through the tower twice. He got creative in the next fight against French Vanilla Goddess with GP Rain and an auto crossbow when Love Token came out. The Stooges refight wasn't a problem with the ribbon equipped, but the fight took a while with Slow being cast and just Sabin against Larry, Moe, and Curly. After an easier Ghost Train battle, Final Kefka was not going to be as easy with an air anchor for instant death, no mute, but thankfully there was Golem for calmness protection. Pero Que Nariz spent nearly half the run in the final dungeon with a brutal set of bosses, finishing at 1 hour and 50 minutes, 3.5 minutes ahead of second place and 11 in front of third. The Tritok group was given both potent Espers and transcendent characters with buff stats, but they were forced to start with Umaro, and dragons were at vanilla levels and spells. However, character gating logic need not apply with YNPC set to Vanish X Zone, allowing a sequence break for some checks. The other 2 characters were Runic Strago and GP Rain Celeste. Keith McRocks decided to peek the Umaro check to find his boss, Mog, as well as a max cost Illumina for sale in the weapon shop in Narsh, along with a Ragnarok and Returners and fixed dice in the South Figaro basement that was then flipped for 2 Holy Swords for both Celeste and Strago to use. Bahamut was found in the South Figaro prisoner spot, and he headed to the Opera House disruption where mobs of tap dancer coverts would normally be a huge problem, but a pair of purchased Illuminas and the buff stats helped cut them down easily, and after a Pearl proc to take out Haydn, another Esper was the reward. After going through the Magitech factory without a character, Keith put off the Strago checks, heading up to where he knew a 4th character would be in World of Ruin Narsh, after another Ragnarok from the Dragon and Orlance from Tritok, which would come in handy when Mog was recruited with the jump command. Unfortunately, he couldn't put off Strago's checks any longer after Mog's checks, and Kefka at Narsh netted 2 more Espers. Peking Fanatic's tower had Locke at the bottom, who joined the party, being able to swing the readily available Illumina. The last character for Go Mode was Go Go in South Figaro Cave, and the final Esper was from the auction house. Being level 40 with awesome stats meant a 10-minute Kefka's Tower climb and a 10-minute Kefka fight, allowing Keith McRocks to finish 2 minutes ahead of the second place finisher and 5 minutes before third place, so this was a pretty tight group. Lastly is the Lagomorph Lounge, who also opted for some vanilla flavor on both the bosses and commands, as well as sets of slots to start. If we came across Locke, the Curse Shield would be 8 battles max, and Paladin Shields would be available in the world to loot, buy, or win in a Coliseum fight. It was a bit of a longer seed with a Kefka unlock at 8 characters, 12 Espers, and there was going to be empty chests before a counter pick of scaled chests that get better as more chests are open, along with it being count-based instead of location-based, so looting would be emphasized in this set of options. The other 2 characters were Strago and Gogo, with Celeste at the Colingen Inn, Sabin at the South Figaro Prisoner spot, and Shadow at the Collapsing House, which gave Infinite Fluff plenty of check options besides the loathed Strago and Gogo ones. The Paladin Shield was found in the World of Balance Albrook Armor Shop and could be purchased after he did a decent amount of looting to acquire enough gear to sell. Fluff decided on the Velt Cave into Strago Check's loop and went to the Burning House after struggling to defeat Senor Behemoth in a timely fashion for additional levels. Leaning into the vanilla bosses, Infinite Fluff chose checks that were conducive to the strengths of his party, with spells that were learned like Fire 3 and Haydn, and going through the Magitech Factory for Locke at the end. He continued fighting bosses that gave more XP with Doom Gaze prior to getting a 1-battle Curse Shield to get an easy 3rd Paladin Shield. Imperial Camp had both a Valiant Knife and Katana Soul for an offering in the Monster in a Box, which is nice for the offense, but not progression towards our lengthy goal. Eventually, Gao was found in the South Figaro Cave for Infinite Fluff's 8th character, but he still had 7 Espers to find. Cyan was the reward at Mount Cults, and while it was his 9th character, his checks were either peekable at Doma Siege, or in the case of the Dream, lean towards Espers. After getting Esper and Realm from Gao's checks, he was finally back on the Esper track at the appropriately named Esper Mountain before going into Cyan's Dream 3 for 3, and an Owser's Mansion for Go Mode at Esper number 12. With vanilla bosses in Kefka's Tower, he opted to get Bum Rush for Sabin, as it was going to be a slog, and Infinite Fluff also sent his entire team up the full metal path, opting for some time loss and walking through the tower twice, but it allowed for quicker kills against Inferno, Guardian, and Poltergeist that allowed him to finish a whopping 35 minutes ahead of the next placed runner. So those are the tables and strategies that the winners of each group in round 1 took. This is a Battle Royale style tournament, so the last runner from each table was eliminated down to the Lagomorph Lounge, and the cards from this round will carry forward onto the next round, with the remaining players at the table getting to draw another card to append to the options that have already been chosen here. So we'll be back to look at what happens next, and I can't wait to see it. I've been The Schwantz27. Until next time.